History is often told by the victors, shaped by societal norms, and curated for public consumption. But what about the stories deemed too dark, too disturbing, or too controversial to make it into the pages of history books? Today, we're diving into tales that were buried, erased, or simply deemed too unsettling for our textbooks. These are the stories that time tried to forget, but not us. Welcome to Darklight Archives, where we shine a light on the shadows of history. In the summer of 1518, the citizens of Strasbourg in the Holy Roman Empire experienced something inexplicable, the Dancing Plague. Hundreds of people danced uncontrollably in the streets, some until they collapsed, others to the end of their lives. Theories ranged from food poisoning to mass hysteria, but the exact cause remains unknown. The authorities' solution? They hired musicians to keep the dancing going, hoping people would dance themselves out of it, a decision that only led to more loss of life. In 1816, an ominous and strange phenomenon swept across the Northern Hemisphere. Known as the Year Without a Summer, this was the result of the massive eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia the previous year, which sent volcanic ash high into the atmosphere, blocking sunlight. The effects were catastrophic. Temperatures plummeted, crops failed, and famine gripped Europe and North America. Entire communities starved, and some turned to desperate measures to survive. This dark chapter of climate chaos and human suffering has mostly been forgotten, despite being one of the most haunting natural disasters in recorded history. In the 1950s, after the horrors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the US government started Project Sunshine to study the effects of nuclear fallout. But this wasn't your average research project. To gather data, they secretly collected samples from deceased infants and children across the globe without consent. The public outrage was massive when the details finally emerged, but even today, this remains a disturbing chapter in scientific history. In 1920, Catalonia saw a wave of violence known as Bloody Christmas. After a year of tense labour disputes and strikes, Catalonia's military governor ordered an armed crackdown on workers and activists. Dozens were unalived in brutal reprisals, and hundreds were detained without trial. This dark moment in Spanish history has largely been erased from history books, a chapter almost forgotten, but not quite. In the early 1900s, young women were employed to paint watches with radium, a glow-in-the-dark substance. They were told it was safe, but the reality was far more sinister. Many workers began developing horrific illnesses, disfigured by radiation poisoning. These Radium Girls fought against the powerful corporations that had deceived them, leaving a legacy of worker protections, but also a chilling reminder of corporate greed. In 1814, London streets ran with beer, literally. A massive vat at the Moo Brewery exploded, flooding the surrounding area with over 1.4 million litres of beer. Buildings were destroyed and 8 people tragically drowned, known as the London Beer Flood. This strange and tragic event was both a freak accident and a dark, almost absurd moment in history that's largely forgotten today. Alferd Packer and his fellow prospectors were trapped in the Rocky Mountains during winter. When he emerged, Packer was the only survivor, and rumors of cannibalism quickly spread. While Packer insisted he only ate his companions to survive, the case remains one of America's darkest tales of survival. It's a story often glossed over in textbooks, but still lingers in the folklore of the American West. In 1917, Halifax, Nova Scotia, was the site of one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history. 2 ships collided in the harbour, one carrying explosives. The resulting blast unalived over 2,000 people, obliterating a large part of the city. It was a tragedy that few remember today, overshadowed by the events of World War I, but it remains a haunting reminder of the devastation of war. In the year 1212, thousands of European children set off on a crusade, believing they could peacefully convert Muslims in the Holy Land. But many of these children never made it. Historians believe many were sold into slavery or lost their lives on the perilous journey. The Children's Crusade remains a dark chapter in medieval history, one that's often sanitized or omitted in modern retellings. The darkest tale on our list is that of Unit 731, a covert Japanese research unit during World War II. Scientists performed horrific experiments on prisoners, using them as test subjects for biological warfare, frostbite studies and forced infections. The atrocities committed by Unit 731 are so harrowing that they're rarely discussed openly. Many documents were destroyed, and some involved were granted immunity post-war, but the victims and their suffering remain a chilling reminder of human cruelty. These are stories that time, shame, and discomfort have hidden from mainstream history, but even the darkest chapters of our past deserve to be remembered, not to haunt us, but to remind us of what must never be repeated. If you want to learn more about the hidden, the eerie, and the mysterious, don't forget to subscribe to Darklight Archives, where we uncover the stories others tried to bury.